Hey there, my name's Jason, and I'm going to give a bit of a dive into one of my recent projects. It's called Molt, and it's for building command line interfaces in Node. So what I have in front of me right now is a monorepo with a couple packages, and the one that I'll talk about today is Molt Command. The other packages are currently Molt types, and just Molt itself is sort of a TBD kind of framework that's going to build on top of these namespaced @Molt packages. The @types is a small one that @Molt command builds on, and that's we're not going to talk about that smaller building block, but yeah, so just dive in. There's some alternatives for each of these different packages out there in the ecosystem. Arg is built by Versal and sort of for simple scripts and things, and that's where Molt Command kind of sits in. Is I was often building simple scripts and using Arg, but kind of wanted better type safety and better runtime validation as well, automatic help and things like that. As far as like kind of a larger ambitious sort of framework that would be more in line with some of these other tools here, that's something I might do in the future. But I'm definitely not there yet, haven't started. So this Molt command, you can already use it. There's a lot of docs for what it currently can do. There's still things I want to change and add over time, but yeah, I'm already using it in like in a very minor way at a project at Prisma for some monorepo kind of scripts. Actually not unlike this monorepo, or if we go to the root and look at scripts, you can see some release scripts here that are used for managing the monorepo, and it's sort of dog fooding some of the packages in the monorepo itself. So, but yeah, we'll kind of get into that and I'll demo it interactively. But yeah, I think I will work kind of my way down the README a little bit, although I'll probably jump around a little bit as well. The README is pretty thorough, and in kind of working through the guide, we'll cover most things. I might actually completely ditch what I just said, and maybe once we get coding, I'm just gonna kind of run with it. Or maybe come back to this README to see if there are some specifics I left out. Whatever, let's see. So I'll boot up a new project here. Demo time. Is it? Yeah. Okay. Oops. Go into VS Code. We're going to add. So it would just be @Molt command, and we're also going to add Zod, and you'll see why in a second. All right. I guess we'll also TypeScript and oops. We'll just init a new thing here. It's going to be a big file. I don't really care much about it except strict true. Okay, that's what I wanted to check, so it's fine. And then we'll just make a demo. So let's see here, should be able to just import, yeah, there it is. Okay, I'll go full screen here, and let's check out what's going on. So command is a namespace that is, there's not much else that's exported from here. There's a setting, but yeah, everything kind of works through this namespace that called command that Molt command exports. And so we just want to build up some intuition about what can be done here. So I'll start with parameters. Just going to do a parameter called hello world. Oops. This is where we bring in the Zod part. We'll say it's a string, min, let's say 5. And here we have args. And we'll kind of be going between the static types and the runtime throughout the demo. So first of all, args, what do we have here? So, yeah, so it's a chaining API. So to kind of wrap this up, we're just gonna parse it. And here we have the arguments that came through the CLI. So if we've gotten to this point in the code, we're good. One other, it's not really a big deal, but parse is going to take in the process standard standard in, and it's also going to consider the process environment, which we'll talk about maybe a bit later. But if you for some reason kind of wanted to shadow or customize or just completely overwrite either of those inputs, the command line or the environment, which we just call line and environment. These are both inputs. If you want to override either of those from just pulling in the global defaults, you can. So, but yeah, usually I suppose you wouldn't. So let's see what this looks like. One more thing I'm going to install. TS node. And I think we're good. So if I just run TS node against demo time, let's see here. Let's try the extension. Maybe I need to. Demo time TS. What's going on? Oh, I just called it demo. And that should be enough to get it. Yeah, there we go. So first thing you'll see, so it's still 0.4 I think now from Molt Command, but yeah, so things are generally rough, but they're also there are things that are working and whatnot, and there's a lot of tests and so on. So everything is on the one hand not final, but anyway, what software is. So we'll just talk about what there is so far. So yeah, cannot run command. You made some mistakes. Missing argument for flag hello. Here are some docs for this command, and then it just outputs the help. So this help that you're seeing here is the same help that we would have seen if we would explicitly run help. And then yeah, you see something a bit nicer here where it's or not nicer, but yeah, it's more direct and explicit. It's just like the help. It's not, you didn't run something wrong or anything. This is what you're explicitly asking for. But now the flag we defined was hello, so we just put in there. No problem. It executes. In this case, it does absolutely nothing, but it ran. And we can try the validation. So here, sort of similar to what you saw before, but this time it's the mistake is that there's an invalid value for hello, and then it says here are the docs for the command. It's not, in this case, not super great feedback, right? I mean, there's nothing about the validation error that happened, which was it was too short. At least we know the flag, but not why it failed, and nothing in the docs that talks about the particular validation rules for that input. So yeah, sort of a rough edge there, but better than, or rather, it's in scope for working properly, and it's validation is built in. So if you're using some other tools, you would be left here. You'd end up having to maybe have Zod on the side. You'd have your Zod schema, and then you would be schema parse, and then throw, and just none of that is going to be on the people of this library. Don't have to worry about that part. Okay, I'll add some other details here. So one other thing to note is when you're defining inputs, you don't need to the format is pretty flexible. So I can put flags there. I could put short flags. I can mix them up. I can have hello 3, and then here I have a short flag of Z. And we take a look at the effect, first of all, statically. You see these are building up on the result. And there's this concept of the conical name. And so that's usually the first long flag. So you can see hello 2, hello 3 here. And you can have aliases. So if I put here hello 3A, that becomes it's the first long flag, so it's the conical. And these other flags you see here are they can be accepted, like the user can pass them, but in your implementation, you don't care about these aliases. You just want to work with one, and you want them all to convert. The inputs to all converge into this one place that you're going to actually implement with. So that's kind of useful. Yeah, it's nice that you can kind of, if you're into kind of expressing your parameter names with these like flags to stylistically, you don't need them though. Like this is literally going to be the same thing. So same thing, you have the 3a hello 3a is still there. So pretty flexible. And I'll just quickly show what that looks like. So foo bar, see some in T. So here now we've got foo. And we'll do something useful. We'll just log what we send. Actually, we'll just log the whole args object. There we go. And now here we're going to, so it was bar thing. And there we go. Help is a flag, as you saw before. You could pass in, right? I can pass in help here, and when you do, then you can see here, you've also got some. It doesn't look very good. Actually, looks like interesting. Looks like there is a bug on the help there, so that's not very nicely rendered, and yeah, it shouldn't look like that. But I'll take a screenshot right now I'll fix that later. Save. Okay, so what I wanted to show though is not so much the help part here, but that you could pass bar, you could pass foo, and you can also pass t, and that's all going into the foo property on the args internally. Now didn't talk about that yet, but yeah, so Zod, so we define schemas with Zod, and then we just pass those in as sort of the parameter, the schema for the input on the command line. So that takes care of validation. We also take advantage of some other things that Zod allows. So let's say we want to give a description here, blah, blah, blah. Come back here. Let's get that help rendered again. And there, now you can see it coming through on the help, auto-generated help. And I'm going to get rid of the aliases for now. Definitely got some issues there with the rendering of the help, making things look a bit confusing there. Try that again. You see, so that sort of the type is rendered above, and then you got the description. Okay, another detail about Zod. So here you see the default. There's a column for like the default value, but if it's required, it kind of rendered in this way. There is no default. You have to pass it. If you make this optional, let's look at what happens. So now you see, unfortunately, another rendering problem with the help here is the columns are not aligned. So this undefined should start at the default column. I'll take a look at that. But anyway, you see that it's undefined for default. I could use Zod to actually give a default here. So it's a string bar, and if I come here, you actually see that default is rendered, which is cool. And Zod allows you to do like dynamic defaults too, which is common. You might need that for some reason. So if you do pass in some function, it will actually try to render it, which might or might not always work. If you have, for some reason, like let's say it throws for some reason, whoopsie, it's not gonna like blow up the whole thing, not the whole system, right? So it's sort of like sandboxes that error and says like error trying to render this default. In terms of line wrapping, I also have it done nice word split, nice word preservation. So it will just be like, oh, I'm going to chop at this length and then continues the word here. No dashes or anything. I'm going to make that better as well. There's an issue for that already. So, but yeah, just kind of give you a sense for some of the things going on there with auto-generated help and Zod's features. So, looking at that from the point of view of internal, here we see foo, it's guaranteed, right? If we say it's optional though, then we see foo can now be string or undefined. That's fine. And yeah, so and then the default sort of, it's not going to still, so it's guaranteed here internally, but now if I'm executing this, I can, so the default is whoopsie. So when I run the demo, oops, I still have, whoops, I still have the throw error. Hold on. Right, so not going to complain that I didn't pass the flag this time because Zod's default kicks in, and you can see that that bar default kicks in on the internals. Cool. So there's a couple other commands that you can chain on like the command namespace, a couple other methods rather. Parameters is just like this kind of object, right? You kind of pass in a bunch of properties for your different flags, flag names, with values being the schemas for those parameters. But so that's fine. But I have another method called just parameter, and it has some trade-offs. There's some interest, and then parameter is exclusive. We'll talk about probably at the end. But parameter is one by one, and there's some reasons you might use it, other than maybe just personal preference and stylistically. There's some reasons you might use it. So let's look at one of the reasons now. We're just gonna move over this definition. It's not that different. So now we have this, I'm gonna drop this. I'm actually gonna just disable prettier for this demo. I'm thinking about ways to make Molt kind of just generally look by default a bit better with prettier. They don't really, like I'll give you an example here. If command were a function, you could see prettier would just put this on its own line, and if command is a property or variable and you do property access, then that comes up on the line above, which I find looks really bad here. However, if I get a couple, let's say I chain this a lot, maybe you get something more reasonable. I also don't know why prettier wants to put these two things on their own lines. I thought I had my width set quite high, so maybe in this case though it's using a shorter line. I usually use like 100 character line width, so I'm not used to it, doing that. Anyway, this is like, for me, just a lot of the things about this are not super optimal. So I might, see if there are ways to, like guides or something, or maybe ways I can improve the API just to make it play better with prettier. I don't know, we'll see. For the rest of the time here though, I'm just gonna go full on manual, put that prettier ignore directive up there. So back to this alternative API, parameter. You can define lots of parameters here. I wanna just take a moment, kind of cool static feature that I'm kind of proud of, at least pushed some of my TypeScript knowledge when I first developed this. So as you define multiple parameters, there'll be an error here, which is, and it actually uses types to give you the error statically as a message. It's kind of a trick, but basically, when there's an error statically here detected, we kind of give that error to the user using a string literal type, which you're not actually supposed to satisfy by putting the error message in your code, of course, and that's kind of intuitive. I don't think people actually think you need to do that. But you'll see like here, error, the name foo cannot be used because it is already used for another flag, which is true. I defined it up here, and it's not going to give you errors. It kind of short circuits, right? It's not going to go through which is, I guess, too bad. But this is a heck of a lot better than having to write a test or getting runtime feedback or something. Of course, in this naive example, kind of looks like, why would you do that? Maybe in a large CLI, it becomes a little bit less trivial. Or if you're merging, if you've got maybe if you've got parameters merging from other modules, which I'm not exactly sure what that would look like in this case. So scratch that. But I am like interested in seeing, as you scale kind of a command line implementation, can you preserve some of the static type safety like this? I don't know. One other thing that, even in like a normal command line tool though, like, there's a lot of command line tools that can still fit in a single file, single module, but will span many lines of code. And I think like another reason this might look less trivial is like, so this case is just kind of stupid obvious, but take a look at something like this, right? So you've got foo, bar, quox. I mentioned before we showed how so the same kind of concept of a parameter name expression, right? That we had for the keys, that applies here. I can put those flags, sort of flag syntax here if I want, with like short and long. I kind of prefer to just keep it flat like that. But yeah, so something that's cool, I think, is that you see the V here, like it's been taken up by this short flag. So even an attempt here to use it on its own is not going to work, even though it's not conflicting with the main canonical name of this other flag. Or if you have an alias, you can do foo or foo2. Then here foo2 is going to be an error as well. So yeah, it's like not like mind-blowing usefulness here, but it doesn't cost you anything to have this feature, and it's just kind of, I think, makes the API feel a little bit more alive and responsive to knowing what it means to be building a CLI. So yeah, we'll kind of see again if this scales for at the framework level, and you split this across multiple modules with different sub commands and things like that. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, so that's one advantage of the chaining API with doing parameter. You can't do this type safety with just a straight up object. Although it kind of enforces itself, because you would never be able to put two keys called foo, right? That will be caught. That's just like, that's not. I go back here and I do foo. I'll just do the string, and I do the same thing, right? Like, okay, that it catches that. But what's interesting is, because of our name expressions, right? You could still do like foo and a v as a short flag, and now from the point of view of just like vanilla JavaScript, these do look like different keys, right? So it's not as semantically, objects are not semantically aware of this concept of name expressions. So with TypeScript, we're able to actually represent and parse those name expressions statically and kind of build those kind of key collision checks of names into the API, which is, I don't know, I definitely nerd out on that a bit. First time I got to kind of put TypeScript string literal template parsing into to use, so I was kind of excited for that. Yeah, that part's pretty straightforward. Like at this point in the API, trying to think. I mean, we've got a little bit more content here, so just to give you as the kind of, you can see the docs flushing out a little bit. There's on the website, or on the README, there's also like a couple more real world-ish. I mean, it's real world. This is like help taken from the CLI that's used to do Molt releases in the monorepo. So this is like, but it still doesn't have any of like the help descriptions and stuff. This one's trying to be a little bit more realistic. This one's totally made up. But yeah, so I guess there's two big things here. We could talk about the environment. I haven't said anything about that yet. And we could talk about mutually exclusive parameters. And I think that will probably do it. Don't think there'll be anything to. No, let's do that. Let's stick with that. So let's do environments last. We'll kind of stick with the API we have in front of us. So parameters exclusive. Yep. Settings. So in settings, right now we have the ability to. That's odd. Oh yeah, no. We have ability to set a description for the command itself. I don't know if we actually leverage that in help yet. We have ability to turn the help on off. So, like you noticed, right, when we just run, right? So we'll just run this. They all have defaults. You see, there's always that help false. So that means help was not requested. But like if you kind of just want that help basically uninstalled as a kind of magical parameter, settings allow you to do that. You can choose to not show help on error if there's any kind of user error. Do you want to automatically show the help to them? You can turn that off. when they pass no arguments. So like basically, so in this case, actually, like I'm passing nothing, right? So there's yeah, like, do you want this case when you just run the CLI with no input, do you want that to show help? And I think by default, if I remember correctly, it tries to do something kind of smart, which is like, so you could force it one way or another. Help. Let me actually try see if that's true. I think. Yeah. So you can. So notice like you have these. You have no parameters that are required. So this feature doesn't really kind of conflicts with that concept, right? Because if you can execute it without parameters and still have side effects, then how could you know what the intent is? Is the intent to run those side effects, the kind of the default side effects, or is the intent to kind of show the help? It's not really useful anymore. Whereas I think in this case, I might be wrong about this. Command not run. So this is like error. This is like help on error. But I think it would be, let's see if it does it on the optional case. Yeah, interesting. I will revisit this. I'm gonna take another screenshot. Kind of some semantics there that aren't super clear. Okay, I think that actually, yeah, this should be kicking in some of these cases. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that setting. It's not super important anyway. On error, so this is yeah, if you look, so you can either exit or throw, which is kind of interesting. So what you've been seeing so far is throw, exit, that's the default. It's kind of usually what you would want, I think, for like a lot of simple scripts. You build a CLI, you execute, if there's some validation error or something, you know, just kick the user out and show them this kind of, this useful default help. Right, so here it is again, right? So just exits. However, if for some reason you have some other kind of, this is like we use it in tests. There's some in the test suite. Sometimes you don't want to exit because it kind of messes up the execution of the test framework runner. But yeah, in your code you can wrap this in a try catch. You know, put the args, let args. You know, you can do this whole shebang, right? The dance there, and then you could handle the catch, you know, you could catch the error yourself and do something. I'm not sure like why, but it's there because I think, you know, for those odd cases where someone really does have a use case for that, they might be putting a larger context of code, you know, the assumption that it's just like clean one-off, you know, module, greenfield, whatever. Who knows? I don't want just something silly like this to be kind of a headache or blocker. So now it's on throw mode, and you'll see still renders the help on error, but this time it didn't actually exit the process with like a, you know, exit one. What you're seeing here is still the process exiting, but because there's I believe it's like a Node.js unhandled error, which, yeah, or anyway, it's, yeah, error is thrown here, error missing, you get the stack trace, and so that's like all the default Node stuff. And then parameters, and in here you can configure parameters. You can configure only the ones that you've defined, so it's sort of type safe in that regard. Oops. So in here you got like settings for environments that were defined. And for that reason, I believe you would not, first of all, be able to, you know, you can't upfront configure settings right now, because you wouldn't get a nice experience with like, you get no type safety there, right, for the parameters you have defined. You could still do something like this though, or no, that's not true actually. So I've defined the types for settings to be pretty strict right now. They're available, like anything after settings can only be parsed. You can only parse after settings because, again, by putting parameters after settings, you kind of like miss out on type safety here, and just it's like kind of like more likely you go on sort of an unhappy path. But I actually have thought that, or seen the fact that there will be cases probably where settings at the beginning would then also have effects on the static types and then affect the kind of possibilities that are here in the downstream API. So there's kind of this like two-way relationship where I'm gonna have to reconcile that and kind of rethink some of the API maybe if it gets enough features and sophisticated enough. But anyway, right now There's nothing about settings that would actually impact, the downstream happenings here. So keeping it after is just a pure net win, and that's where it is now. That's where you configure environment, which we'll talk about in a sec. So that's all the settings. The only other method here to talk about then is the parameters exclusive. So first, trying to motivate an example. So actually, you can just slide over to we had in the README. If you see here, so this is just a refresher. This is a CLI. Oops. This is a screenshot of the help for a CLI in the monorepo for doing releases of Molt. And there is this concept of being able to do releases by version or bump. So I can say, release package Molt types, and I want this version, like a specific sem version. The other way to execute the command line is to say, no, just calculate the semver for me, but I want an increment using, increment of this level of the semver. I want the increment of the major level or the minor level or the patch level. And so it's using semver, and there's like semver packages on npm and whatnot. It's going to just calculate the final version for me, and I just sort of specify that more of like the intent that, I know I broke the API, so this has to be a major or whatever. So just thinking more in terms of the contract and less the detail of the specific version. So anyway, that's two ways to execute the CLI, version or bump, these two different flags. But it will never be a valid state to have, it would be like a user error to specify both. So mutually exclusive parameters are were kind of actually designed for this when I was building out this dogfooding the CLI. I saw this pattern, and I actually saw problems on both sides. So I saw problems on user error sides where you'd want to provide better error messaging for the user when they make this mistake. You'd want to kind of make this clear in the docs automatically without the CLI author having to kind of tailor the docs to explain this. Also, just to be clear, mutually exclusive, this could be 10 mutually exclusive parameters. It just happens to be 2 in this case, but there's nothing about the number. It's always going to be, it's at least 2, but there's no limit conceptually. So this, just to be clear, is not, it's not limited to 2. And I guess, and then just in terms of the static type safety, as a CLI author, being able to declaratively kind of implement this just allows you to have static type safety in a way that's really nice. It gives you, and you're going to see in a second, it just has these invariants built into the derived types. So let's say that foo and bar don't get along, and we definitely want these to be exclusive. So bar is always a kind of jealous that foo goes first or something. So so we have to give, when you're doing working with parameters exclusive, this concept of a group or a group label. So we could call this, we'll call this Quux, and then we're going to get back kind of a nested builder, which I just tend to make an underscore. I mean, you could do $, you could call it, whatever. I don't know. I don't think the name here means too much. I almost treat it more like syntax. So I don't really want to deal with having to think of a name, to be honest. Internally, we call this an exclusive builder. So we have this concept of builders for chains. So there's a root builder, right? And there might be more builders in the future. Right now, there's 2 kinds of builders. There's the root builder, and then this method, with the callback function in this closure, it receives a exclusive builder, as we call it. But that's a very not a great outward facing name. So again, I just kind of think of this as more like syntax. I think in the README I used a double underscore, so I can just roll with that, I guess. And what do I want to say here? Well, I mean, yeah, we've just done it. So you have to return the builder. That's one thing. You don't have to do a done or a parse. Just call the parameters that need to be exclusive here. And a couple other things. You can't have a default. So once you talk about mutually exclusive parameters, right? You there's certain semantics that don't really make sense. It doesn't make sense to have a default for one of those, for example. The concept here is you're going to get exactly one, given, and if you had defaults, you would kind of effectively be allowing multiple to be given, like, right? This doesn't make sense. So default is actually not allowed, so you get a static type error if you try that. So we kind of limit the types of Zod here that are allowed. Description's fine, and min and all that's fine. Okay, so let's look at the types. So we're going to see that Quux is again the group label for those parameters, so it shows up, and we get back a nice union type with a discriminant property underscore tag. That is the name of the parameter in this case, and then value is going to correspond to the value. So it's here it's string doesn't look so useful to separate, right? But let's make that a bit more different. Let's say we put an enum here, and there's going to be some alphabetical stuff. So here, hold on. I just need to get rid of this min. You can't do a min on an enum. So now you've got sort of how, you got the value string and the value. And actually, I'm going to go further on this. I'm going to make it an enum of numbers. Actually, I don't know if you can do that with enum. Can you? We're going to use literal. Let's see if this works. I'm not sure. Literal 2 or 3. That might not work because of string number or Boolean. Or C literal 2 or C literal 3. Okay, interesting. Okay, I think it's just a problem with I'm gonna take a, because this should work. This should be allowed. I think I see what the problem is. We have too strong of a type with what we allow here. So unwind, and let's just go simple with number. So we got a totally different type now. So we got number or string, and that means when you access the value, right, so via Quux, you want to access the value, and you don't have all the methods for value. And the reason is you need to discriminate the property in TypeScript first. So you can say if args Quux tag equal to foo, args Quux value, and now you can see I'm working with all the kind of normal string methods. And in the else block, I've got value. I've got the methods for numbers, right? And so having at the implementation level, forget for a second, even just at the user level, but this is already convenient way to consume the mutual exclusion. So, right, like if you're working with something like args from Versal, the package there, right? You would end up with a type that's more like something like this, foo. And you get a string or maybe undefined. I don't know about the null thing, but and then you get your bar, right? And then that can be a number undefined. And you just you're like, okay, if foo, if args, foo, but like in here you still have args bar, and according to TypeScript, it could also be a number here, right? But they're mutually exclusive. And you're just not leveraging what TypeScript can do for you with an approach like this, where it's just like, yep, they can both be undefined, they can both be string or number, and there's nothing encoded here about the fact that actually when foo is a string, bar is always going to be undefined. So I'm a huge stickler. I really try to put as much in the types as I can when I both build a library or when I consume. I'm optimizing the application to try to be built with type safety as much as possible. And so this kind of thing makes, and especially in complicated code, having these invariants like propagate throughout your code base, I find it's like a huge value for refactoring, for understanding like how data is supposed to flow. And you can like point to a question and be like, why can that be null here? And when you have a kind of a statically type safe code base that's, or at least more, like more leaning towards that, you can ask those questions and they actually usually lead to interesting conversations, because there's a reason. It's not just, oh, well, because, it's kind of sloppy types. It's actually, no, it can be null there for XYZ reason. Anyway, bit of an aside there about my nerdy preference for types. But yeah, I think like, no CLIs that I'm aware of kind of would kind of out of the box kind of give you this nice approach to mutual exclusion. And granted, it's not necessarily the most common feature you're going to need, but I was interested to see if I could get this to work, and I did. It was kind of fun. So that's the type side internally. Let's look at like kind of how this affects the user experience. So I'm gonna run the demo, and now you see that there's this little grouping. So foo and string are still rendered here. This little kind of grouping with this little icon's kind of random. I don't know, just kind of felt like it showed this, empty side, full side, kind of like choose a side type of thing. Anyway, so that's just like a bullet though, really for the entries. And they're in this kind of group, and yeah, I actually haven't tried that before, but if I expand this out, should just, yeah, it works. Cool. And you can see like for default, right, that concept doesn't apply, but you can actually change whether a like an entire group is required or not, right? So in this case, let's actually like now try to run with it. So in this case, you can see it's required, right? As the docs say. So this should, if I did this right, this should return an error. It says missing argument for one of the following parameters. And also see the help here, right? So this, like the Quux group name is not, it's just a label for the concept. So for example, the concept here for releasing, it's like the method of release. Do you do a version or do you bump? I mean, I could call this strategy or whatever, but it's just a label. From an input point of view, you're still dealing with just these names and parameters. And so they're like the message. It's like it's aware that you need to input one of the members of this group. So that's cool. And if I put, let's say tar bar, that that's accepted, that works, that's great. Now another thing, but so you can't, at an individual parameter level, you cannot change the optionality or the default, but you can make the whole group itself optional. So okay, well, let's look at the static type errors now yelling at us. So what happened there? What happened there is I think the error starts right. So you can see Quux itself, right, as a property is now nullable or optional. So it can be undefined. So if you want this to work, you actually need to throw in like the question mark and say, okay, if you get to this point, but now you get to this point, right, you could be here for two reasons. Tag was not foo or Quux was not defined. So you need to either put an optional there or do an else if, and check for bar, right? But so anyway, great type safety again on that regard for implementation. So on the command line, now it's optional, right? So if I pass nothing, right, that's fine. Well, and I believe the help for this should show that, yeah, so the group, so it's like the default for this group now is undefined. And then we just put these little like dashes, or it's like an M dash, a long dash, for the default of parameters within the group, because again, it does not apply to them. That's about it for exclusive parameters. I think one thing that doesn't work today is, yeah, there's no default. So you can't like put a default here. I think that kind of would be cool. Statically, right? Like in terms of what could you put here? Well, this should be, it should accept, like the return here should be a union of all the possible values that members in the group accept. Shouldn't be too big of a deal to implement that. So maybe I'll, yeah, I think that would make sense. I mean, we should just do that at some point. I should just make an issue though about it. So I'll just take a screenshot here to remind myself that I should create a GitHub issue. Save that. Okay. Last topic is around the environment stuff. Okay, so let's go back to a while back when we had like some parameters here, foobar quux, right? We'll get into the settings for environments in a second, but let's start with just basic here. So I believe, is there, okay, so quux should be required. Yeah, just sorry, I just realized I wanted to show actually something. Okay. I wanted to show another error case that's handled nicely. So I'm just going to do that. Okay. I think that should work. Right. So now it's not optional, and okay, great. But what happens if you pass 2, right? So if I pass quux to bar and the other one was quux 3 tar, what happens here? So you get this arguments given to multiple mutually exclusive parameters, quux 2, 3. So you're guaranteed, like in your implementation, maybe this becomes like something you can control a little bit with configuration and like finesse what you want the user what you want your user's experience to be. But default right now is just basically that, like, you get kind of the safest input, and the validation is strict. So like if a user passed in both of these, they're mutually exclusive, right? So what does that mean? What is the user trying to say? You know, is there a preference for one or the other and whatnot? So it's kind of unsafe to interpret an assumption about what the user is intending. At least that's like without knowing more about the context. I think the CLI defaults to that position, and maybe if we get some use cases about why this should be configurable or whatnot, maybe we'll look at that. But yeah, the position right now is that this is not safe, so we don't allow it. Okay, now I think I'm actually done that section. So for environment stuff, so we see that quux is required, and so when we run this without quux, it's going to be an error that says missing argument for flag quux. Okay, great. So we can pass that in, right, as quux, pass it in as a string, invalid value for quux. I think actually it's complaining about the fact that, I wonder, it accepts it's got to be never mind, it's got to be a, yeah, I have a 5. So that works. But the environment aspect of this is kind of cool, which is you can, so Molt Command accepts input, of which command lines is one kind, but actually environment is another kind of input. And they're both kind of on equal footing. So like out of the box, everything that you can pass in the command line can be passed via the environment as well. And there's a default naming pattern for that. So here you see the name of the parameter is quux, and then that parameter can be passed with the command line flag, quux, but it can also be passed in with a representation of CLI underscore param underscore quux equals ABBA 5. Let's see if this works. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but okay, well that actually didn't work because of a typo. So that I think we're still good. There we go. So you see that when Molt ran this command, it will prioritize the line. So the line, if so, like for example, if I pass in Quux here, and I pass in cha-cha, you'll see cha-cha gets through. So the environment one is ignored. So there's kind of a shadowing. So you could think of it like, yeah, from a sort of scope point of view, there's environment, and then like a lower scope that's closer, that's considered first and prioritized first, is the line, and the line can shadow the environment. There might be some cases where actually you consider the relationship to be the opposite. So like, because we consider in this environment, this shell, right? In an interactive shell, the programmer might have like a envrc or whatever, like shell config at boot time, a bunch of environment variables, just by default are there. And then like when they're executing commands, those command lines are kind of closer to their immediate intent for that context. I think this can flip in like a CI case. So in a CI case, you put code into a script and you've got like hard-coded flags, but then maybe like you can configure your CI job by injecting environment variables or something, and maybe you can see that as kind of inversing the relationship. But right now there's no way to change this, so it's always going to be look at the line first. If there's input there, take it and then stop. But if there's not input there, go look in the environment, and if there's a matching pattern, then take that instead. And if there's nothing, like if it's not in the line, it's not in the environment, but it's required, throw an error, right? So that's kind of how this is working. So this is out of the box. CLI underscore param. It's case insensitive. We do everything to kind of make this as user friendly as possible. Here I put underscore. I put like underscore UX at the end there. Doesn't matter. Of course, the prefix is pretty important because so you can see I took away the prefix and now it's not seen. It throws an error and says you didn't. And this is because of course like who knows what's in your environment. So like just arbitrarily saying anything that matches your defined parameters, like there's no coordination there. Super dangerous default to not have the namespace. So the default is the namespace. Of course, the namespace is not always convenient. And actually, if you look at sometimes it's not only not convenient, but it's well, I was going to say it's more correct, but anyway, however to say that, like you can see in the case of the release script, there's a GitHub token that can be read from the environment, and we want to consume that in a way that's like zero prefix. We want just that environment variable exactly as exactly like that, just GitHub underscore token to map to that parameter. And actually, in the case of this command line, we disabled all the other environment reading. So the only thing you can pass an environment variable for the CLI is the GitHub token parameter, and the name of the name of the environment variable name that it will look for is GitHub underscore token. So you can really control a lot of the mapping here. And so let's look a little bit at that. So let's see. Okay, first thing. So this is now we're gonna get into the settings. So we have settings for the parameters, and right now, like there's nothing here to do other than environment. So you can configure environment for parameters. I also in the future. Like there's some reasons why it's nice to have it centralized here. There's also, I think, a case to be made to just like be able to do some environment configuration at the level of like co-locate that with a parameter. I think actually looking at here, right, like being able to co-locate the fact that GitHub token parameter should be for GitHub. It's kind of nice to potentially have it maybe co-located in that parameter definition. Anyway, right now it's all centralized here. So that's how it works. And basically the way it works is you've got dynamic keys that map to the canonical names of your parameters, all right? So this is another case where we do some fun mapping. So if you have like the bar-v with the short flag and foo with a foo2 alias and then an f short flag, none of that matters. So it's always using the concept of the canonical flag, canonical name for parameters in the config of environment for settings, for parameters in the settings here. So let's say for this Quux, right? You saw that it failed when we only put Quux in the environment. Well, what about if we just want to give it make that example work? So here we'll put the prefix, right? So prefix is going to be null. So this says Maybe it says nothing. Did I make a mistake? String. Oh, all right. It's not null. Okay. So actually, we use a Boolean. So we say prefix. Nope. False. Okay. Now let's run this and see what happens. And there you go. So quox, again, in case does not matter. So this is you can put the capital, you can make it all lowercase. Oops, that's gonna fail. You can make this all lowercase, uppercase, doesn't matter, mixed case. So now quox ab5 is getting through from the environment because we mapped, right? No prefix. You can also have multiple prefixes. So you can change the prefix. So you can say this needs to be let's do something more usable here. Oops. Okay. Go back here, and I think if you just have one, I'm going to get into multiple in a second, but you can have just prefix oops. So I think you can kind of predict. Open this. This is easier. I keep switching. So here, oops. Underscore. Again, case never matters. So now that still works, but if I go back and just run the quox, that will fail. I can have multiple. So I can have an oops. I can have an oops too. Oops to underscore quox. That did not work. I think I had one too many O's. That works. I can, so just generally, if for some reason you want to toggle it on off, but you don't want to lose your config. Anyway, just for flexibility, like that's a separate field. So when you have enabled false, right, it no longer applies, right? So it's just not going to work. But if I, enable true, which is the default, then it works again. So there's this little toggle there. Did I miss anything in there in terms of? No, okay. Is there anything else here? So just enable the prefix, yeah. So one other thing to shout out here actually is in the help. So if I show the help here, you'll see, now you see a couple things happening. So let's actually go to the default and then we can compare. Right, so this is the default help. Okay, so you have check marks, environment. So what this means, and you can read, there's like this little one footnote kind of thing. It says parameters can be passed arguments via environment variables. Command line arguments take precedence. Environment variable names are snake case versions of the parameter name or its aliases. Oh, that's a good point, actually, the alias part. It's case insensitive. They may be they must be prefixed with CLI parameter or CLI param. So by default, there's actually either of those prefixes will work. And then it comes up with examples, and the examples actually use the parameters you've defined just to make it a little bit more contextual. Okay, so that's kind of the default. And as soon as we tighten up, these specs here and like disallow most of it, you see now a couple things happen. Check marks are gone, so those are X's. It means you can't even pass environments to those parameters. And environment variable names that are accepted now are listed explicitly. So you see oops quox and oops to quox. And actually did not that's interesting. There's a bug there actually. This is like you saw that we passed, or maybe you don't remember, but we passed, you can actually see here, right? So in our history, oops to underscore quox, right? That's what I expected, but you can see the rendering is actually a bit wrong here. I think it's because we use like a low dash snake case thing and its algorithm is a bit different than what I guess another part of our code is expecting here. I'm kind of in favor of, now I'm trying to wonder, which one is actually the bug here, but either way, it needs to be addressed. So I took a screenshot of that. Another kind of nice touch, you see that we update the docs kind of are reflecting this change in semantics now, right? That we've customized things. So some parameters marked in docs can be passed arguments via environment variables. Command line arguments take precedence. Environment variable names are so it's kind of repeating some of the parts that from last time, right? By default, they must be prefixed with CLI parameter or CLI, which is still true. Though some parameters deviate, shown in docs. So in this case, there's actually none that are accepting the default. So this could even be improved to not even mention this because like there's just literally no other environment variables here that are accepting that. So and then it says though some parameters deviate, shown in docs. So in the docs you see where you deviate basically from the defaults. And then it shows some examples in here. You see oops, quacks, and it will never. So the idea of the docs is also you'll never see an example here that actually won't work, which is kind of, I think, a nice usability touch. So yeah, so these X's. So what's going on here is that this is sort of a design choice in the implementation. Is when you begin, everything accepts just environments with these default prefixes, environment variables with the default prefixes. Once you start to define specific parameters, you kind of get like what you get by default of what you see is what you get semantic. So it says so the idea here is that, like, if you've defined quacks, it just assume, like, you by default now turn everything off and the only thing you get is quacks. Of course, so basically it becomes an allow list by default, right? And so this is kind of intuitive because you look at the code, you see what you're going to get. Of course, that if you have like 60 parameters and you actually want to keep all of them enabled and you only want to customize one, this is like a nightmare. So that's where the interesting thing of the default comes in. So what happens with default is, by default, the default is going to be turned off for all environment variables for parameters when you have specified some explicit ones. But if you want to, by default, keep the defaults of the other ones, you can just pass default true. And so now what you've actually done is sort of like, it's not really an allow list or deny list, it's just like it's a customized kind of list. So let's look at how this changes. And we'll just use the help to kind of, I'm not going to go through every runtime permutation here, but just the help will actually tell us, if you trust the help, you know what's going to happen. So you now see check marks on everything, but there's some that deviate from the default. So this is sort of these docs now make a bit more sense, because it says by default they must be prefixed with CLI parameter or CLI param, which is the case for, like, say, foo and bar, though some parameters deviate, which is the case for quacks. And then here you see examples with all three. So that's kind of nice, I guess. You can also have a prefix here and change the prefix for all of them and just say, like, my app. Apparently that's what Copilot wants me to put, so let's go with Copilot. And that is interesting. I think I'm kind of of the opinion that this should have, I think I know what happened, which is that the enabled is still false. Let's see if my hypothesis is correct there. Yeah, okay, I think that when you start to put an object here, that should count as defaulting to true. So how do I do this? Should default when object like this is passed. Pass to this. Take a screenshot of that. Okay, cool. So that's my design intent there. It's kind of like a what you see is what you get, as much as possible within reason. And so you see, yeah, imagine that the enable didn't have to be passed, but anyway, when you do pass it, it does what you think it would do as well. And you see here that so now the by default line changes. By default, they must be prefixed with my app, case insensitive, though some parameters deviate. Because again, as long as there's not just one kind of universal rule for your environment mapping, then there's this like kind of caveat always of, well, some deviate, and then it just says to look at the docs above to know which ones deviate. The reason is kind of, if you really like think about this in the abstract of a general system, you could have thousands of parameters in theory. You could have thousands of different mappings within that, right? Like there could be no consistent, like, so to actually make a sentence here that sort of accounts for all cases is very, well, there's probably like a very short list of ones that account for most practical setups, but it's still, it's a bit tricky to come up with a general solution there. So I didn't go too wild, and I think this is like, I think it's cool to kind of have some polish here, but it's also like, it's kind of not gratuitous, but it's luxurious, let's say, compared to some of like the other basic things that I kind of maybe want to ship for Molt. So yeah, you're getting a sense for what this can do. I think one other thing is I'll show you that the semantic of a deny list. So we've shown that when you just put an environment config like this, that's an allow list. When you do default true, you kind of just get to a kind of config list, and everything is just as it was, and you're just customizing some. But what about this? Default false. So this is kind of cool. So if you do this, this would be like if you don't even want environment. So actually, this is an interesting case where when the environment is just basically straight up disabled like this, your user won't even get this like column with environment. They won't get the footnote. It just simplifies the CLI. That actually might be what you want for some cases. Maybe you just don't feel like the environment is worth it, and that's totally fine. Maybe it often won't be worth it. In fact, I don't know. But yeah, you can just default false. It's gone. But then maybe so that's one thing, that just totally disable it. I think there's a short. Can you do this? I think you could just do environment false. Yeah, so you don't even need to kind of go to the extent of doing the default. If you really want to disable it, it's just as simple as that. Now, in terms of deny list, so deny list, right? So deny list. So you could say, I want them all. Allow list. So you want them all false. No, deny list. You want them all true, but now you want to like take out, you want to take out a few. So you could just say like quux false. So let's see what the effect of that is. So what that does is you haven't changed like the mapping defaults, right? So it's still CLI parameter prefix and all this. But except for quux, which you've said is false here. So now that this is not mappable, like you can't pass an environment variable to supply that an argument to the quux parameter. Yeah, and I mean you can go wild here and have configs for other ones and just yeah. So I think this kind of config, I was kind of happy with where it landed in terms of it seems to allow you the allow list, the deny list, kind of a merge of both. Allows you to just disable the environment feature completely. This mix, I just thought maybe I'm biased, but it seemed kind of intuitive and gave a lot of power. And I was kind of happy with how that turned out. That's basically all there is at this point. Maybe I'll just tie up with kind of where this is going. It kind of at this point already is my choice of tool now for short scripts. Like it's better. I think it's basically just objectively better than something like arg for there's help for users, validation, runtime, static type safety with TypeScript for the implementer, building the thing in the first place. Definitely like some rough edges here with like how rendering of help is and some errors that we saw throughout here. But like, ignoring those bugs that just need to be wrapped up. And even with those bugs, to be honest, I think this is like my go-to now for building like a tiny script where I just need to accept some flags and stuff. But there's still some things I want to do explicitly. So we look in the issues here. If it will load. My arguments. Yeah, we definitely covered everything. Oh boy, it's loading slow. Maybe I can just try on my command line. Let's I thought I had a command. Okay, anyway, they're here. So yeah, better paragraph rendering, incorrect column layout, I caught that before. Option to render some help with kebab case. Yeah, I mean, the camel case default is kind of opinionated, and especially in a help context, maybe users want to see kebab. It's maybe a more classic CLI case to use. And we didn't mention that, but like users, because we didn't use multi-word, but let's say here we had foo bar. Not only do we handle, again, you can use whatever case you want here, and then in here it's always just going to be the camel case variant. You can also pass in like foo bar as camel or foo bar as kebab. Just works. But in terms of rendering help, we always render like then you kind of have to show the user something. So it's like which case do you go with to show them? It currently does camel, but I think it'd be nice to just open that up to allow kebab for context where that's more desirable. allow specifying default behavior. That's just like when you don't pass arguments, can we, some new scalar types like date time, maybe durations would be kind of fun. Maybe like being able to pass in, from, to, and you have to pass in like a, something that's within a 24-hour time limit, day of time kind of thing. Those kind of flags for durations would be, I think, kind of nice to have built in. Auto-generate documentation for selective environment specs. Can't remember what that is. Whatever. And automate. So Inquisitor usage. I don't know if there's a good example. Yeah, and Inquisitor is a thing where basically it prompts you for input. Like, actually, I can kind of show you if I did. Oh no. Anyway, prompts you for input, and you ask question 1, question 2, question 3. So the idea is that maybe there's like so here you might have like Quux. It's required, right? Then you can either pass a default internally so that the user can like choose to not supply it. But what if there was a thing called like prompt? Prompt. That would be like, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe there's also a way to like turn prompt on for the whole thing. I don't know. Or prompt required. Or maybe prompt not just required, but like even optionals. I don't know. And the idea here is like you kind of can upfront pass your CLI, and then like maybe if you don't have a TTY attached to the terminal, so like in CI, for example, it doesn't make sense to have this feature, but in an interactive terminal session, you get prompt and you can like, the user will be like, oh, you didn't supply this flag, like, just put it in. And that could be, I think, kind of a cool, it kind of makes like for free, your CLI just becomes this kind of more of an interactive program. And the cool thing is you've already defined your parameters. You've already defined the validation. If you've defined the describe, you've already defined help. Maybe there's other kinds of help here, like short help, long help, or prompt help. Maybe there's other kind, like maybe you need to differentiate the helps there. But generally, I think you have basically everything you need here to create an awesome experience for prompts. So anyway, Inquisitor is a tool that does that, but I kind of shout out of like, hey, can we just, automate kind of, at first I was thinking about literally using it and automating usage of it, but now I've gotten to the point where I'm like, actually, we would build our own because we want to just apply our own validation at a minimum. I think that's the main thing. So that like in the terminal, like as you put things in, right, it would run the validation that you put that the CLI author defined. And like if you fail validation, get nice feedback about, hey, your value doesn't conform to and then retry and all this kind of thing. So I think raw Inquisitor usage is actually not going to go for that probably, but. And then option to control exit. Exit on parser. Maybe this is already done. I don't know. But anyway, it's just a small thing. So yeah, just a bunch of like rather minor things. I think Inquisitor here is kind of the main kind of big feature for Molt Command. But otherwise, I just want it to work well, improve rendering of the help. And yeah, there's always maybe room for more scalars or something. But Molt Command's, again, supposed to be a pretty small building block, and really like once it kind of, yeah, just polish this off, I think, and then get to maybe this like bigger framework called Molt, which would be using Molt Command, but like building up bigger concepts as well, like subcommands and, I don't know if I'm going to tackle that kind of framework level thing anymore because it's, it's not trivial, but I love terminals. So I kind of wanted the terminal tool that I actually enjoy using in Node, which I haven't quite found personally myself. Yeah, so thanks. If you watch this whole thing, I'm super impressed and surprised. But anyway, wherever you are, have a great day, night, and be well. Thanks.